Welcome to the Nourish Child Podcast, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of growing a healthy child. Here's your host, registered dietitian and childhood nutrition expert, Jill Castle.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Nourish Child Podcast. I'm Jill, and today I have a friend and colleague on the show, Dr. Lynyetta Willis, who is a psychologist and family empowerment coach. She helps frustrated families break free from stable misery so they can create more joy in their parenting or partnerships. And that really speaks to me because I love to make sure we're creating joy around the table, and particularly with feeding. And we all know that parenting and feeding go hand in hand. So I'm excited to have Lynyetta here today because I think what we're going to pretty much talk about is parenting in this culture of everybody has advice for parents in terms of what they should be doing with their kids, what food they should be feeding them, what interactions they should be doing. We have grandparents who are saying, oh, you should make them eat everything on their plate. Or we have friends or peers who are saying, wow, you're doing that. You're giving your child that. Well, you shouldn't do that. So there's all this idea of pressure. And so I think layered in that, there's this idea of things that trigger us, right? And that's what we're going to kind of dive in today. But I want to give you an opportunity, Lynyetta, to sort of talk about the work that you do to the audience today, so they have a framework or some context into understanding what the angle that you're coming from.
Absolutely. First of all, I'm so excited to be here with you, Jill. You're one of my favorite humans, so thank you for having me.
You are welcome. Likewise.
Oh, thank you. So I am, like you said, I'm a psychologist and family empowerment coach, and I help really frustrated families deal with those triggering moments. You know, a lot of times when I first started doing parenting work, I actually started doing parenting work before I even had kids. So there were a lot of brave souls who trusted me with their parenting journey. And now I have
That's
two.
like me doing pediatric nutrition before I had kids. I did that too.
It's very powerful. And what I've realized is there is one thing that undermines all the work that we can put in. Like, I can tell you all the things to do, all the research, everything. But what I've started to realize was our past and our present stressors can undermine all that information. So I have parents who say, I just read the book and I just watched the summit and I got all the right things. And then my kid did that thing and my brain flew off the radar and I couldn't remember anything. Right. And what I started to realize was when we start with the information, we're starting too far down the track. What we really need to start with is what's going on in my brain, what's going on in my body that is leading me to react in ways that I later look back and say, why did I do that? And what we often find is it comes from usually one or two places. Either we're triggered or we're stressed, which I differentiate those. They're not the same thing. And sometimes, and I ultimately ended up creating a 5-step model. It's called the PATHS model. It's an acronym to help parents to really get a deeper awareness around what's coming up in them when they're triggered or stressed or when they overreact towards their children.
Can we unpack the difference? Because you suggest that there's a difference between triggered and stressed. Tell us about what you mean by that.
Absolutely. So I'll give an example. When my not too long ago, I had a situation where our daughter was being, shall we say, fiery one night, and we were trying to get her down and all this stuff. And afterwards, we finally got everything together. And afterwards, my husband and I we went in our room. We just kind of plopped on the bed. And I was like, man, that was hard. And I had already had a long day. I said, man, that was hard. And my husband looked at me and he goes, oh my gosh, she's going to be like this when she's a teenager. She's going to be just like my family members. We have to do something. We have to get her under control. What are we going to do? Da, da, da. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. And what ultimately happened when we talked it out, I realized I was stressed. He was triggered, meaning for me, I had had a long day. So my present circumstances, what was going on in the moment was overwhelming my ability to cope in the moment. And that's what stress is. When we're stressed out, it's because whatever's happening in the moment is overwhelming our coping resources. It's overwhelming. So the present is overwhelming our ability to cope with the present. When we're triggered, our past experiences are overwhelming our ability to deal with the present moment. So for him, when my daughter was doing those things, it reminded my husband of his past experiences with a close relative who ultimately ended up going off the rails a lot. And he was projecting onto my daughter, oh my gosh, same thing. Right. And so he wasn't able to stay regulated in those times. So both of us had issues with regulating in the moment, but they were for different reasons.
I see. So I guess one of the things that just came up for me was like this idea of fear and anxiety, and how does that relate to triggered versus stressed? Because I get that whole triggered. I have 4 kids, as you know, and boy, they triggered me left and right. They also provided stress.
Yeah.
But I also, experienced anxiety sometimes, like this fear of some future occurrence that I had created in my mind that was going to happen. Right. So how does that interact with either triggered or stress, or is that something completely different?
Absolutely. So when we're stressed or triggered, and yes, we can be both. They do go hand in hand. They can feed each other. In either case, what propels them forward and gets that momentum going are the stories we tell ourselves. And actually, in the PATHS model, the first letter is P, and that stands for perspective. And what that speaks to is, how am I viewing this moment? What are the stories in my head related to my child in this moment? Right. So for me, that was a tough night. I'm exhausted. Clearly, our daughter's exhausted. So that was the story in my head. Like, glad we got through this thing. My husband's head was, oh, dear God, she's going to be an awful adult. She's going to be completely unmanageable. She's got to have any friends. We're going to have to put, so it can lead us down the road, right, of frustration. Now, in the moment when things were going on, the stories in my head were probably things like, oh my gosh, why does this keep happening? What's going on? How many more years? So the stories I'm telling myself are going to activate my nervous system in a way that will probably not lead me to the most helpful response if I don't notice it. Right. So the stories in our head don't have to be, I often liken them to like a dog on a leash. It's like, are you walking the dog or is the dog walking you? Like, are you aware of your stories? Are you able to say, I'm aware that's a story in my head right now? Because then that's going to have a very different impact on your nervous system than if the dog is just dragging you down the road.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a great explanation. Now let's take this idea of being triggered and apply it to food and eating, the family meal table, and well-meaning relatives.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I like to call it the relative effect, right?
I love that.
The relative effect. How are our potential loved ones feeding into this trigger experience for today's parents?
Absolutely.
Or from your perspective, how do you see that happening?
Yeah. It's really interesting because even though our elders may not be at the dinner table with us when we're with our children, they are in spirit. They are in our heads, right? Because we can often, I don't think I have ever heard myself sound more like my grandmother than when I'm at the table. Right. Because it's one of those things where it's like food is it's number one, it's necessary for survival. So it's already integrated into our nervous system, right? Our brain naturally tries to protect us around food, like, oh, we got to eat so we stay alive. Oh, don't eat too much. So our brain automatically has these on-off switches. And then you pair to that culture and past experiences, and it adds a whole different dimension. I once had a client who her family history is Greek and Jewish. And she said, in my family, food was inextricably linked to love. If you love somebody, you don't tell them I love you, you eat their food. And if you don't eat their food, that is a great offense and you will hurt feelings. So for her, this idea around food, the stories in her head was, you have to eat. So when she would be around relatives, if her child wasn't eating or wasn't doing, she would get anxious. Right? Like, oh my gosh, what are they going to think? And would often sometimes find herself, if her child wasn't eating, thinking she could notice, if she was able to notice and catch those thoughts around, you don't like my food. What does that mean about us? So these stories in our head can really link how we show up with our children, especially at the dinner table.
Yeah. And I also, in my experience, parents feel a lot of pressure to perform. Like, it's not only just the role of food. I think also what I hear and see from parents is this idea that how they parent, how they're handling food with their children represents like everything in their parenting, and it doesn't. It represents a moment in time, right? But there's this complaint I hear a lot from parents. How do I manage the well-meaning family members who are going to judge my child at the table at Thanksgiving for not eating anything, who are going to make comments about they're eating too much or eating not enough? And all the while, I recognize that this is triggering those parents most likely. But what advice do you have for parents who are having these experiences when they go to family gatherings and their child's not eating, or their child's very picky, or their child's eating too much and piling up their plate, and all the family members are looking on going,
yeah,
you're not doing something right, mama. So what advice do you, or perspective that you can give parents who are listening?
Yes, such a good question. The first thing I would say is prepare. Right? Whenever you go into a family situation, I don't know how many sessions I've had with clients where a lot of it is role modeling before we go visit family, right? Yeah. So preparing your mind, preparing your body, being aware these things are going to happen. How am I going to handle it? And it's best to do that when we're regulated. Right. So it's best to do that when you're sitting. So if you're in a situation where you're like, oh my gosh, here we go, Thanksgiving dinner, this is going to be interesting. Start to pull out a piece of paper and literally write down, mom's going to say blah, blah, blah. Grandma's going to think da, da, da. Uncle Joe's going to say blah, blah, blah. Right. And then write down, what is the truth? So you have one, this is the story they're telling themselves. Because really what we're talking about is the stories in their head, right? Projecting on you. That's what this is. It's not about you. It's about them, So what are they going to say? And then what is your truth? And then the third thing, write down, how are you going to handle it? Because at the end of the day, and I know this is hard because these are our family and we get around family, there's something that can happen within us where we become like little toddlers again, right? Like we just turn in. We can be like 70-year-old women and we become like 7-year-olds, right? When we're around. So we're around family members. So being aware of what is it I'm going to say or do in that moment? Because at the end of the day, the most important thing is that, or one of the most important things is that you are mindful of how that is impacting your child. And sometimes we have to place ourselves in the gap, right? There are times where family members have made comments to me about my children, and in front of them, I intentionally push against those comments. Say, I hear that, and that's the way it was way back when. Now this is how it's done, right? And being able to have those really quick, not necessarily confrontational, but just quick things that you can say, it not only empowers you, right? But it also models for your child that they're not
Mhm.
wrong, they're not bad, right? And so now they're not going to have this negative association with,
Yeah.
in this case, food or how much they're eating or how much they're not eating, those types of things.
That is so good because I've always felt that and advised that what you say, how you insert yourself in the middle, um, is very important. But like what your child hears you say in defense of them
Mm-hmm.
is super important,
Yes.
right? Because you're a psychologist, but I always think about, everything children hear, everything they see just kind of stacks up in their brain and starts to form their own self opinion,
Mm-hmm.
their own self esteem. And if they don't have adults in their lives sort of running counter to some of these negative things that are well-meaning, when it comes from family, it generally comes from a good place.
Yeah.
They want that child to be healthy. They want that child to be happy. But those little comments can really erode,
Yes.
the self-esteem of a child, whether it's about their bodies, whether it's about what they like to eat or their eating behaviors. Like all of those things can sort of chip away at how a child feels about themselves and feels about their body. So
Yes.
I really appreciate that, insert yourself in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other things to say to a well-meaning family member that would be powerful for the parents listening? Because that is probably one of the most common questions I get is, what can I say?
Yeah. I always find that short and unapologetic is always good, right? So if a child, if a parent or somebody in the family is like, "Oh my gosh, look how much food they have on their plate," just saying, maybe looking at the child and the food and saying, "Yeah, he must be hungry." Or like just reflecting back the moment, right? You don't
Yeah.
necessarily have to educate or
Right.
defend. And that sense that whenever I feel like I need to defend in those moments, it's because there's a part of me that thinks I am wrong or there's something
Mm.
is wrong whenever that comes up. So the first step really is to get clear within ourselves. Where are we on this issue? So if you look at your child and the plate is stacked 10 miles high, what do you believe about that?
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. Yeah,
Right?
let's go deeper with that because that's the nut right
Yes,
there.
yes. How does it make, the PATHS model, the second letter is A, which stands for awareness, right?
Mm.
And that's around our feelings and our body sensations. So when you see that plate stacked a mile high, what stories are you telling yourself? And how does it feel in your body? Are you thinking that is so inappropriate? And if so, where does that come from? Might it be inappropriate? Maybe having a 10-mile high plate isn't appropriate. So then what do you want to do about it? Right. So the T stands for tools. Right. So if
Mm.
I'm sitting there and the story in my head is um, my child's going to become overweight if they keep stacking their food up that high and they eat that much. And in my body, I feel tense and the feelings that it brings up in me are fear, right? What
Mhm.
do you want to do? What tool do you want to use? So I always say we're always using a tool in our parenting. The question is the tool helpful or unhelpful? So you could look at your relative and be like, "Oh my gosh, you're so right." And then just start, "What's wrong with you? Don't ever fill your plate up that high." Right now you start shaming your child around this food. Or you might say, "Whoa, that was a lot of food, buddy. Let's see, why don't we do this? Why don't we take a couple bites, check in with our body," right? Or something you can do around that moment to
Mhm.
educate the child without shaming them.
Mhm.
And then also maybe it calls for education, right? Like if it's way
Yeah.
too much food for anybody to eat, maybe it's education around let's talk about how to fill our plates or how to put food on our plates. Right. So
Mhm.
it's really about getting clear within ourselves because at the end of the day, these relatives, all they're doing is they're reflecting back their story and their experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So, and how they impact us is really a sign of our stories and our
Yeah.
experiences and what we're comfortable with and what we're not comfortable with. So, in some twisted sort of way, our relatives are actually helping us because they're illuminating for us what within us needs to be healed, what within us needs more information, which happens to be the H in the PAS model, what within us needs to be healed, what within us needs to be honored, where do we need to dive a little bit deeper and get some more insight? Because
Yeah.
I guarantee you, as a listener, if you feel really strong about something, really, really strong about something, and you know it in your core of your being, more than likely, if a relative says something, you're not going to be as triggered, right? You're going to be like, whatever. Like, like if the relative's like, the sky is magenta, you're going to be like, what? I'm not even going to, whatever, moving on, right? But the times often that we get the most triggered are when they say things that kind of hit that core of like, oh, am I wrong? Am I bad? Am I doing something inappropriate?
Right. Or I don't know where I feel about this, or I'm not sure I'm doing this right. And so if somebody questions it, it just piles on that feeling of insecurity about, what you are doing with your child.
And real fast, I'll say, you can even say that. Like, say somebody says something to you and it's not, you don't know how you feel about it, and be like, you know what? I'm going to think about that and move on, right? Like, again, short, to the point, doesn't have to be apologetic, right? Like, oh, that's an interesting point. I'm going to think about that. Thanks. Moving on.
Hey there, friends. I just wanted to interrupt this programming with a quick announcement. Being a parent has been one of the greatest joys of my life, but like many of you out there, I too have had times when I get overwhelmed, overreact, yell, shut down. And I oftentimes wonder, why the heck do I get so triggered? And how do I even stop these triggers from controlling me when I'm feeling challenged by parenting? And how do I deal with difficult behaviors from my kids in ways that won't make the problem worse or screw them up? I know many of you might resonate with this scenario, so I wanted to let you know about Lynyetta's programs. You've watched her today, and she has spent 20 years helping families heal from trauma and grow personally and spiritually. She is my go-to person for facilitating empowering experiences, and she's hosting a free 5-day live workshop called Calm My Parenting Triggers. It's a workshop series where you will learn how to create your personalized Calm My Triggers roadmap in 5 days and parent with less drama and more joy. You do not want to miss this. You can get access and sign up for her free workshop if you go over to thenourishchild.com/169. That's 169 for episode 169. And you will find a free workshop link to this Calm My Parenting Triggers workshop series. It will be right there in the show notes. All you have to do is click on the link for her free workshop, and that will get you all signed up and ready to go. I hope you take advantage of this. One of the things I taught my own children, but I think it would be a good use for some families in this scenario, is just to do the Bill Cosby, so?
Yeah.
It's just a one word, so? And you just move on. It's like, you don't have an opinion one way or another. It's just kind of like, so?
Yeah, but don't feed the fire. You don't have to feed the fire, right? And legitimize what's being said, especially if you're not sure about it or you just don't think it's okay.
Yeah. So, I've been writing this book, and one of the topics that I've been writing about is this idea of mothers, because this is where the research is really sort of centered around mothers who have had a past history of disordered eating or an eating disorder, and how that can change their interactions with their child, whether it be a fear of creating problems for their child and really being hyper aware and super vigilant of their own parenting around food, or being unaware of the influence of their past history and sort of carrying on some of those, behaviors like restricting portions or restricting sweets and treats and things of that nature. My question for you as a psychologist is, when you think of those past histories, right? And this could be for an adult who might have been challenged by carrying too much body fat as a child. That can influence their feeding interactions and all of that as well. What advice, for listeners out there who might be saying, gosh, I'm really having a hard time getting over these stories in my head because I lived these stories. Like I saw how challenging it was, and I don't want my child to go through that. What sort of advice or tools, if you will, could families sort of start to ponder or think about or use in those situations?
The first thing I would say is get out of your head, or get it
Mm,
out of your head, right? So sometimes it's really easy for us to sit and just perseverate, and we just flip things. And the problem with that is we're like in this little silo. We ask ourselves a question and then we answer the question, and then we ask ourselves another question and we answer the question. It's like, but you are asking yourself and answering your questions. You don't have all the information, right? So
yeah,
it's not even necessarily about running out and diving into, sitting in the library for another 5 hours reading books. Sometimes it's just about communicating to someone else that
yeah,
your partner or a friend that you trust. Hey, I'm realizing I'm having these fears about my children and their sweets. Can we talk about this? I just kind of want to run
mhm,
this past you and hear myself say these things out loud. Right. And
yeah,
what are your thoughts? The other thing is check in with your pediatrician. I
mhm,
think pediatricians and dietitians, people like you are so underutilized
yeah,
because you all have the information. So instead of going to Dr. Google, who I think would have their license revoked by now, if they really were a doctor, check in with people who actually know the facts. When you
yeah,
go and your child gets weighed and all of that, asking, how's their weight? Most
yeah,
likely, there's a good chance it might be fine.
mm,
So really just getting out of your head, asking questions, getting curious, because one thing we cannot do, or we can, but it's really hard, is to convince ourselves that something that we have experienced to back up isn't true. Right.
yeah,
So if you have experience with, well, growing up, my sibling used to eat these things and now they're, you know, this far overweight, and now you see your child eating it, it's really hard to convince your brain that the same thing's not going to happen.
mhm,
Now we could sit and logically think there are probably a lot of mitigating factors that don't necessarily translate in this situation with your child. But
mhm,
the best thing that you can do for yourself and your child is to get out of your head, talk to people, get in that you trust, get information, and use that to inform those parts of you that
yeah.
are freaking out around what your child is or isn't doing.
Yeah. And I think probably in the case of a past eating disorder, working with a therapist specifically on parenting around food with
Mhm.
your children could probably be quite beneficial.
Oh my gosh, that's huge. That's why in the PATHS model, healing is its own area, because
Yeah.
if we don't, we can change our stories all day, we can be aware of our body, we can try our best to switch up our tools, but if there are still those unhealed wounds, or those aspects of our history that we're not acknowledging, they're going to
Mhm.
come in and it's going to hijack things. Right. So being
Yeah.
able, or you're going to do a lot of work to continually monitor your stories, monitor your sensations, monitor. Right. So it takes some of the pressure off when you can just sit with somebody and get some healing around
Yeah.
what that was like for you. I remember in college, I did not have an eating disorder, but I did have disordered eating.
Mhm.
And I would only eat salad and cereal. That's all I would eat because I had this fear. At the time, I was in an abusive relationship and there was some emotional stuff that was going on. And there was this fear around gaining too much weight.
Mm.
And as I'm older now, that fear is not as prevalent. And I also had to go on this weight loss journey where I ended up dropping 40 pounds because my blood pressure was too high. So it was
Mm.
medical issues that led me to have to release weight. And I had to be very careful because I had this history and I
Yeah.
have a daughter.
Mhm.
And as I'm losing weight, I'm aware I'm looking at labels and saying, this has too many carbs. This has too much
Mm.
sugar. I can't eat that today. I can eat that on Friday. Right.
Mm.
And so I realized that my daughter was listening to this. I have a son too, but he wasn't as impacted. He was like, whatever, I'm going to eat whatever I want. But she would ask me like, Mommy, does this have too many carbs? And I'm like, oh my gosh. Right. So being able to say, that doesn't matter for you. I have high blood pressure. This is a medical issue, but also I became very aware of the words that I was using
Yeah.
around food and what I needed to look out for in order to stay healthy. But also my daughter, when I started, she's probably like 8. She wasn't thinking in that way. She was just hearing
No.
me and seeing
Yeah.
me look at labels and make comments about carbs.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that honestly is one of the most challenging things for parents if they have um, a need to change their diet for whatever reason, medical, desire, whatever reason. The most challenging thing is to do it in a way that doesn't have a negative impact on the growing children in their family.
Mhm.
And it really has, and I don't know, I'd be interested in your thoughts about, the cultural influence that is just, we're talking about pressure from well-meaning families, but the reality that's just one small slice of the pie. There's such a cultural societal pressure on parents to raise, healthy eaters, fit kids, smart kids. I mean, like it is unending, the pressures. And so it is even, my children are in their 20s. 10 years ago, I had pressure to raise, but the pressure that I experienced raising my kids was really around, I'm a pediatric dietitian and I need to do this right. That
Yeah.
was the pressure I was putting on myself. But today, 10 years later, our culture, our social media, our constant barrage of news items of, obesity, this and eating disorder, that. I mean, parents are almost paralyzed around what is the right thing to do here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And
yeah.
yeah, I'm interested in what your thoughts are on that. If you're seeing the same thing, because I know you work with a parent audience and, that itself can be so triggering.
It really can. And there are so many times I tell parents, please take a social media break. Stop it. Don't do it. Because there's too much. And of course, everybody on Instagram is picture perfect and wonderful. And oh, look at my perfect little children going to school for the first day today. Right. And then you have like these parents who are struggling with, let's say, or I like to use the word dancing with these neurodiverse kids. And it's like they're ready to pull their hair out and they could barely get their kids out of bed, let alone, in their picture perfect little, right? So it's one of those things where, again, goes back to the think about how you feel when you consume some of this stuff. When you're scrolling through social media or you're watching TV, really start paying attention to what does this bring up in me and why am I doing it? It's okay to mute certain people on your social media feeds. If you don't want to just get off, mute them. You have to unfriend them, just mute them. Tell
Yeah.
Facebook or Insta or whatever, I don't want to see this. Right.
Yeah.
And then what ends up happening is you only go to them when you want to see them. So you don't feel hijacked, but be very, very clear and intentional about what you are consuming. There's
Yeah.
sometimes my husband and I are like, okay, we're going to watch the news for literally 8 minutes and then it's got to go off, right? Because I mean, we know, it's going to have an impact on us, mind, body, and soul, if we sit there and just inhale all this stuff all the time. So don't be afraid to mute things. Be very clear and intentional about what you do consume and who you do listen to and where you do get your advice from.
Yeah.
And be clear on when you do hear something and it does trigger you or it does stress you out, asking yourself, what's that about? Is there a part of me that believes that or that's afraid of that? And what do I need? Do I need more information? Do I just need to acknowledge that and move on? What do I need in this moment to help me with that?
Yeah, that's great advice. I wanted to touch on one more topic before we sort of wrap things up, and that is on the whole idea of co-parenting or co-feeding children when partnerships, either parents or co-parenting partnerships, aren't necessarily seeing eye to eye on how to feed kids, what to feed kids, how to react to the behaviors kids show at the table. What is your advice on that? Because I would imagine that can be quite triggering too.
Oh my gosh, yes. My husband and I, we would go through that so he was raised. So another big thing that I've started to notice, and there's actually research to support this, is that if a parent has food insecurity in their past, sometimes they unintentionally encourage their children to overeat in ways or engage food in ways that isn't as helpful, right? And so with Patrick, he always had food, and there was always this awareness around food is precious, food is special, you have to eat everything on your plate, that sort of thing. I had that a bit, but I'll be honest, I didn't follow it growing up. I would just wait for somebody to go to the bathroom and chuck it. I mean, I didn't really have that as much. If anything, it was the opposite, But so when we would sit at the table, he'd put our poor children in this impossible situation where he would say, okay, eat all your food on your plate. And then they would say, well, I'm done, I'm full. And he'd be like, all right, fine, cover it up. And if you get hungry later, you can come back. And then they'd come back and be like, can I have a snack? Now, a snack in our house is like an apple or an orange. And be like, can I have a snack? And be like, I thought you were full. Sit down and finish your dinner. Wait a minute. So I'm sitting here.
Patrick.
I'm sitting here looking at this so they literally can't get a snack because if they eat all their food, now they're too full to get a snack. Now the snack is just gorging them, And so it's one of those things by your rules, they can never get a snack. And he's like, but they have to eat all their food. According to whom? What if we taught them to fix their plates more appropriately, right? And so we really had to go down this road. Now, we have a pretty solid connection around the kids and the parenting. So there would be moments where I could tell I was really stressing him out when I'd question him. But we were able to come together usually away from the dinner table, away from the kids. That's the other thing. When you have these conversations, don't have them in front of the kids, because what ultimately ends up happening or can ultimately end up happening is now you're posturing, not intentionally, but for the children, right? Because now the kids are watching you like a tennis match. Who's going to win? Who's going to win? Am I going to snack? Or am I not going to get snack? Right? So pulling away and having a discussion when the kids aren't around, okay, well, what does this mean? And why is it important that they do that? And can you see the issue here? And just having a discussion like you would about anything else around that. Now, what Patrick and I ended up realizing was he was able to see okay, yeah, that does come from my history. Because when I asked him, what's the worst thing that could happen if they don't finish every morsel on their plate before they get a snack? And he was like, they won't appreciate food. Okay? And so that was the story. They won't appreciate food. They'll be wasteful. And then people will start to think they're wasteful, right? So now we're in that sense of how other people will view them, know? So then we got into this really great discussion actually about this very thing. How did we grow up and what did all this mean? And then what we ended up settling on was they can eat. And when they're ready to stop, they can stop. And if they want to get a snack, that's fine. If after the snack they're hungry, you need to come back and eat more dinner because that's a sign that your body needs more food. As opposed to snack, or orange, apple, popcorn, blah, 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 but 15 different things. So that's where we ultimately settled. But the biggest suggestion that I can give to parents on any topic, but especially this one, is make sure you stay on the same side of the net. Put each other on the same side of the net and put the issue on the other side of the net. Because what ends up happening in these is you end up fighting. You're on opposite sides of the tennis net, fighting for your perspective. But when you can realize the ultimate goal here is that our kids grow up to be, understand the importance of food, to be healthy, to have a good relationship with food, to not be hungry in the middle of the night. Like, these are all of our intentions. This is ultimately what win would mean for us. Now, on the other side of the net, you put whatever it is you're trying to decide on. So how do we want to handle, their requests for snacks? How do we want to handle what does a full plate mean, or what does end of dinner mean, right? And now you're no longer battling each other, but now the opponent, quote unquote, is the issue that you're trying to decide on. So now you're a team.
Yeah, that's so good. That is so good. I love how you stated that. I think people will find that super helpful.
Yeah.
So, Lynyetta, you have a program, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, and then also tell my listeners where they can get in touch with you. And I think also you have a free workshop coming up. So I'd love for you to drop that link too.
Yes. So the free workshop, it's called Create Your... Why am I blanking on this? It's called Create Your Calm My Trigger Map. That's what it is. Sorry, I was flipping on that. Now, I back up a bit. I have a program. It's called Trigger to Transformed. And it is really a program, especially for parents who want to raise their kids differently from how they were raised and find it difficult to do so because they're getting triggered, they're stressed, they're overwhelmed, and they respond or react to their kids in ways that leave them feeling guilty and shameful, right? And it's a program that we'll be together for a year. And that's not because it takes an entire year to get through the program. But what I've realized is really important is you can't change behaviors in 6 weeks or 12 weeks, right?
Yeah.
It takes time to really retrain habits and rewire your brain. So in this program, people get access to coaching by me. It's me. It's not a personally trained coach of mine. It's me, right? Every other week. They get access to a research-based curriculum that I developed to help you really go through all the paths that I just described, so that you can really rewire your brain and retrain your habits in a community of other parents who get it to really help you along the way and support you. And most of the time is spent, doing experiments, rejigging things so that by the end of our time together, you really feel transformed and you really have a renewed, different, stronger relationship with your kids.
That's awesome.
So, yes. And I'm doing a free workshop. It starts on September 12th. And the link, please go sign up for that, is calmmytrigger.com. Very easy. Okay. Calmmytrigger.com. And sign up completely free. You'll get all the information. And I'm going to literally teach you. People say kids don't come with a manual. Well, I'm going to help you create a manual to calm that trigger and connect with your kid more. And also, if you want to get started and get in touch with me, if you go to mytriggerscore.com, I have a quiz that you can take that will help you to see where you are, like who you tend to become as a parent when you're triggered and what you can do about it.
Oh, all good stuff.
Yes.
I know the Nourish Child podcast listeners will love all of that. I think you will probably, you're really connecting to a lot of the work that I end up doing with families and that we talk about here, and reframing it in sort of triggered versus stressed, and sort of mapping out a system for managing yourself when you are triggered, I think is going to be super helpful for my listeners. So thank you so much for that. And thank you for coming on the show today. This is really a lot of juicy, good stuff.
So good.
And I look forward to seeing how, your program rolls out and everything. I'll be happy to support that too.
Thank you so much, Jill. I appreciate you. And thank you for having me.
You're so welcome.
Thanks for listening to the Nourish Child podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.